All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on this month's ABWK Project Swap. It's the bi-monthly showcase of what's going on in Brush with Kindness and critical home repair projects around Minnesota and the Midwest in general. Thanks again to everybody for joining us today. I'm Molly Berg. I'm the Sustainable Building Program Manager at Habitat for Humanity of Minnesota. And running back up today is April Reardon, who's our Capacity Building Program Director. So hopefully if we experience technical difficulties, she can head that up. If you want to ask a question, there are two ways to do it. You should have a little hand icon in the GoToWebinar control panel thing that should have showed up when you logged on. You can click that to raise your hand, and then we can unmute you and you can talk. Or you can type your message in the box down there to either everyone or just the organizer, and we can answer your question that way too. So throughout this presentation here, go ahead and ask questions anytime. There's only one project to highlight today, so we might be a little on the thin end of the time that we have allotted. So feel free to fill that space up with as many questions as you might have. So today our guest panelist is Pam Dobson. She is the Executive Director down at the Southwestern Minnesota Habitat for Humanity. They're
Hey Molly, have
I can
you
actually show
moved your
you a
slides
picture.
yet? Slides haven't moved at
No, I
all yet.
haven't.
Oh, okay, good. Just checking.
Thanks for that. Thank you
And I
for the
sent
heads
Pam
up.
another,
Oh, to everybody.
yeah,
The last time that we did a webinar, we had a little technical difficulty, and I thought everybody was seeing the slides move, but they weren't. But I'll move this. This is one of Pam's slides, but I'll get started just showing you guys kind of where she works out of. And there's a circle on the map down there, way in the southwestern corner of the state. So Pipestone, Rock, and Nobles County is their service area. So she's our guest panelist today when she joins us, and she's going to take you guys through a particularly difficult A Brush with Kindness project that they were wanting to take on that might have turned into a critical home repair project, and how they are dealing with handling that situation. It kind of got out of control for them. So as I always say, the disclaimer is this is not to scare you away from doing A Brush with Kindness projects or critical home repair projects. It's just meant to show you that when you come across difficult issues, you're not the only affiliate that has had to deal with it, and there are some tactics and some kind of acquired knowledge that other affiliates have that you can draw on in dealing with your own situations. The work of A Brush with Kindness and critical home repair is really important, and they're great programs, and sometimes they can be really, really impactful. But we should know that we can't solve every problem, unfortunately, and there comes a point where we might have to say no to a project or back out of something that we had initially thought was okay. So it's not meant to say don't take on difficult projects. It's meant to say, try to do your homework first, and if you do have to back out of something, take some cues from some affiliates who've been there before. So again, don't be scared off by the details of this project. So looks like Pam's still not with us, so I might actually jump ahead here to my part of the presentation, and in fact we can kind of reference it later because my part is the home assessment piece of things, and Pam was dealing with most of what happened in the initial like family services stage and board approval stage and that kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll through her slides real quickly until we get to mine. But I will give you a little bit of background on the project details themselves. So you can see this is the house that they were going to do some outside work on. They were going to repair the roof. There was a hole in the roof. They wanted to get to that, and they wanted to repair some of the sills on the windows. So they were looking at this project from the outside and thinking that it was well worth their time and effort and money, and something that was very doable for them. And it was a very, very willing partner. Pam will get into the details of that. And if she doesn't, I'm pretty familiar with the project, so we can go through it, you and I, and I'm sure Pam would be fine with that. Oh, looks like she is logging on right now. So maybe we'll give her a second and we can actually go through the project in the order that we had it. Apologies for this. Also, don't let this dissuade you from wanting to present in the future. As I always say on these ABWK project swaps, we prefer to have you guys talking about your project rather than me. And I can do all the kinds
I
of
just
help.
talked to her on the phone, so she might be just logging in, and so sounds like a busy morning for her.
Okay, gotcha. We thank her for taking her time out. So as we're waiting for her to log on, I'll let you know that some of you might already be able to tell that there are unseen forces that are at work in this roof that are causing some major interior issues with the home. So what initially looked like a simple roof patch project, in fact, kind of spiraled out of control into something much grander. And there are tools we can use to avoid this situation, that affiliates can use to avoid this situation. But generally, they mean going inside of the house and making sure that what you plan to do isn't connected to a lot of other things. What they're coming up against, this slide notes contractor review. He had gone out to the contractor had gone out to the house in the first place to take a look at the roof and thought that patching the hole wouldn't be that big of a deal. But when he took a closer look and kind of got inside the house, he discovered that what would likely be the case is there would be some framing members that had rotted out. And unfortunately, when you open up the roof and it turns out that there are framing members that have been rotted, you in fact have to replace those framing members. And when you replace one framing member, many times it's not okay with code to just patch in a new piece of a structural framing member. You in fact have to replace the whole system. So what he was looking at is a potential situation where he would open up the roof and automatically be required to replace the whole roof. So that's the kind of situation that they were getting into. Looks like she's still not on yet, so I'll advance the slide and let you guys know what we found. What we found when we went inside, in fact, was, you can see over on the left-hand picture, this is one of the bedrooms inside the house. And everywhere that a framing member was sitting on top of the top plate, you can see mold starting to grow out from it, which means that that framing member itself is rotting. And these are, I guess, what would best be described as the cross pieces. They lay all the way across the roof. So there's no way of getting that piece off without replacing that whole cross piece. In the basement, what we saw was some of the structural framing members that were on the bottom of the house holding up the floor were in fact starting to rot out as well, because there were places that plumbing had leaked through down into the basement. At first, it wasn't immediately apparent that these two things were connected, but once we got a little deeper into the assessment, we figured out the extent of the situation. So here's sort of the breakdown for what we figured out was going on in the house when we took a closer look. The roof leak had caused roof structural joists to rot, and that had caused mold in the ceilings of the home. So just right there, what we're talking about is not just replacing the roof structure, but it's connected to the ceilings. So now we're talking about replacing all the ceilings as well. Now, the mold in the ceilings led to structural deterioration severe structural deterioration in the bathroom bathroom and some in the kitchen as well. So that's a direct cause of the mold in the ceiling. Now, the structural deterioration in the bathroom caused an uneven surface, which upset the plumbing system and caused it to bend and leak. So the plumbing system was bending and leaking onto the floor, which rotted through and affected the structural members of the basement joints, or joists rather. So what we've got is rot and mold in the basement that ultimately has been caused by a roof leak. In addition to that, you can tell that the windowsills of the home are also a result of the leaking roof. So what they'd originally thought was a simple roof repair now turns into something that they really can't get at without doing a complete gut of this house.
Hey, Molly, just wanted to let you know that Pam is here and she is unmuted.
Excellent, Pam. So glad you could join us. How are you?
I am fine. I apologize. Got busy filing papers and didn't hear my alarm go off.
It totally happens. I'm going to move this presentation back to the beginning. I just kind of took a little out of the middle and started telling people the situation we found at the second assessment. So I'm going to roll these slides all the way back, and you go for it, and you just let me know when you want me to advance the slide.
Okay. We're in southwestern Minnesota, and I think 2 years ago when we came to our first LENA conference, we heard about the Brush with Kindness program. We were excited about it, but we're basically kind of trying to restart as a chapter. So I had it on the back burner. This year when we had the availability of getting a VISTA the staff person, we thought this was the prime time for us to get involved with it, and definitely a need within our 3-county area to be able to fix up housing so that people are able to stay in them and to improve the neighborhoods and also the different counties and that. So that was a big thing for us to get started. So it's a brand new program for us, and interesting enough, we started getting phone calls before we even got our VISTA staff member. And with people inquiring about this project, not even quite sure how they found out about it. So we've been trying to build the program and have been starting some partnerships to work on a program. In the meantime, one of the people that have been calling me was this person in Worthington, Minnesota. And she had a house that has a hole in the roof, and basically her insurance company will not insure the house anymore due to the hole in the roof. She had been applying to a lot of different agencies to be able to get some assistance and had not been able to get the assistance at all. So that's kind of how it first started out, and I kind of kept putting her on the back burner saying, well, we don't even have the staff member signed yet. We are going to have a staff member starting in August, but we probably wouldn't be doing anything till possibly this fall. If even by then, it would probably be spring of 2015 that we would start. She was she's pretty persistent and kept calling, and I kept trying to put her off. Well, then she called and said, well, she had some material. Could we just come and patch the hole? So that's how we first started out with going and looking at the house and stuff like that. We were just, I thought, well, okay, maybe we can just patch the hole for her or whatever. I could find some other people to volunteer to do that. I drove past her house and I saw the house. And in the meantime, I had already called a nephew of mine who's a contractor and said, would you mind going by that home, looking at it, looking at the material that she has to see if it's sufficient material, to see if it's quality material that would work, and kind of let me know what you think about that. But after I drove by the house and saw the roof, I said, could you also possibly give me an estimate as far as what the cost would be to repair the whole roof, because the house is really small. So I assumed the estimate would be a lot smaller also. Should I continue, or are there any questions thus far? You see the house there, and the back part of the house is where the hole is. It kind of extends and goes back further. kind of another hip roof on the back of the house going the opposite direction. My nephew had gotten back to me and gave me a quote about $2,400 for putting a new roof on, but that wasn't, that was kind of a rough estimate that he had, using kind of a mid type of shingles type of things. But I had told him that labor, we would not need to pay for labor, that we would just use Habitat for the labor, for volunteers. So I did not have any labor estimate in that first one he gave me. In the meantime, we had been talking with a person from the Minnesota Housing Partnership out of the Slayton area who covers our area, and we're talking about how our programs are similar, maybe a little different, and if there's any way that we could possibly start working together on some of these projects. And so we have actually been going through, you know, a big thing with them was, how do we figure out the sweat equity for homeowners? And I said, well, we really don't put a dollar amount on that, and tried to explain the sweat equity program. So we were able to look at each other's applications in that and see if we can coordinate the application process in that. In the meantime, we had already had the homeowner of this home, she had already completed our application and given us all the financial information that we needed for her, had showed us a deed for the house, and we knew of what her payments were, and all that type of financial information that we needed. With working with Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, they need to use a licensed contractor to replace the roof. So that's tended to be a little bit of a problem with us, but we thought, well, we could work around it. And I talked, the homeowner themselves finds a contractor and asks them to come in and do the bid. And so that's what she ended up doing. She called somebody that she knew. He came and gave a bid, and that bid ran substantially more than what we had planned it to be. So he actually gave us a quote of about $3,304 for the material alone, and then another $3,700 for the labor. For Minnesota Housing, we had to have over $5,000 bid because they were going to get $5,000. So we had went, and this was just to replace the roof. So then we had gone to the board with this, saying that Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership was going to partner with us. They would supply $5,000 of the funds, and were we able to do the remaining $2,000 and some dollars, close to $3,000, to be able to do this home, to be able to put a new roof on this house. And so that's what we went to the board with. The board at that time also, April had been visiting us and had talked to us. We have never used the critical repair funding, or the FHLB, I believe it is, correct? Funding. We've never used that within our chapter, and thought, well, maybe this was an opportunity to use it and make it a critical home repair. So that's kind of where we went. That's where we started, and then it was passed through the board that we would look at the critical home repair options and see if we could do that. If we couldn't get the funding for that, we would go to the Brush with Kindness program and just go with replacing the roof with our $3,000 and theirs $5,000. Unfortunately, the estimate given to us by the contractor did say that, and after conversation with him, he was afraid that some of the structural damage, there'd be structural damage in the structural beams, and that we would have all other repairs would be billed at $45 per hour, and then with the material on top of it. So it was kind of questionable what our expense would be when we did that. Feeling, I probably should have called Molly a lot earlier, feeling that we were uncertain about this whole project, or not uncertainty. I thought we were just going to replace the roof. I knew that she needed a lot more work done. So I actually asked Molly to come down and walk through this whole thing with us and how to figure out an estimate. Before that time, nobody had ever been inside June's house or anything. So we were not familiar with everything that needed to be done. I was somewhat knowledgeable of other things that needed to be done, but was trying to figure out how to do it or just replace the roof type of thing. So the estimates were given. Then Molly came to visit. And we have been waiting for the contractor to fix the roof. Thought it would be taken care of, but of course we had to wait till it warmed up around here because it was so cold. And so that kind of delayed us long enough for Molly to be able to come down and join us and walk through the thing with us.
So I'll get a little back into a little more detail on the topics I'd started with before Pam got on. But Pam, I want to note for you, I skipped past this slide, but I know that you did talk a little bit about the process that you went through with your board that I think is a good process and was well informed. You mentioned that you'd gone back to them twice, first with the initial project and second with your new information with your partnership with the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership and with the new bid. So I just want to note that that's a long and involved but very necessary process, and so you had done your due diligence as far as that's concerned. And the board did approve to go forward with it. If I understood correctly, they approved the critical home repair if it was possible, and if it was not possible to partner, they approved it as an ABWK project. Am I right about that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I think our Vista person, I'd asked her once why we're not going further with the with the critical home repair, and she had said because I think she was confused about the program, about the funding, and felt that we were not going, that even if we put the paperwork in ahead of time, that we were not going to have the funding guaranteed. So was afraid to take that step because she was aware of we are very limited on funds right now in our Habitat affiliate. So.
And I think this is April. I would just say I think your board was smart and have put some things in place to be looking at cash flow. And so that's where some of their contingencies were kind of, if we're doing this solo, we can only afford this up to a certain point, and that, in order to do anything more extensive, if in the inspection or that we discovered more, that you would have to do some of that partnership or apply for some of that funding. So that was just, just a kudos to your board to have been really thoughtful about that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there was a measure of, there was a high degree of thoughtfulness when it came to figuring out how much money they were going to have for this project, which was good based on what we found out later on. So let's see. Going back into what we'd started with before, I had gone down to visit Pam and Dar. Dar was their Vista at the time, to take a look at the house and go over there with some assessment tools and the contractor. We met over there with the contractor at the same time to talk with the homeowner sort of about where they were at and see what was going on inside the house. So what we used when we did that, and I'll come back to this slide again, despite the fact that we already went over this tragic looking situation, so I can show you what we used. And those of you who joined us on the property assessment webinar a few weeks ago will recognize this tool because it's the same one that we recommend using for Brush with Kindness projects. So it's very extensive. It's a thick 7-page document, but it does allow you to go through and be really detailed about your assessment. I wouldn't recommend it on a Brush with Kindness project that you anticipate just painting or just maybe doing the roof. But when it got to the point of talking with the contractor and realizing that potentially his work was going to trigger all this other work, it made sense to go through and be really detailed with everything that was going on in the house. So this is what we used when we went back to visit with the homeowner and the contractor. So you'll see the red circle at the top of the page there. That comes from the final page of this sheet. It automatically tallies all the costs involved, and you'll see that it's actually $26,000, almost $27,000 with everything. Now remember, this is should the contractor open up the roof and automatically trigger needing to replace the roof system, which would require getting engineered trusses, replacing all the ceilings in the first floor, and then replacing the structural members in the basement and fixing the bathroom. So all of that would add up to a $27,000 project. And now they have this in hand when they need to go back to their board, or if they need to go back to the homeowner and say, well, here's what we actually found when we got into detail about your house. I know it's not an ideal situation, but we might have to look at not doing this project for you as habitat. Now that's not saying that June couldn't go and patch the roof, just patch it on her own just to get the homeowner's insurance, but as an affiliate you have a really tough decision to make at this point, because you know everything that's going on now. You know that, in fact, the house is structurally unsound and very unsafe for the homeowner. And the truth is the homeowner is not thinking in those terms. It's just her house. It's where she lives, and it seems safe for her because she can go up and down the stairs and use the bathroom and that kind of thing without, feeling like it's going to fall apart around her. But in fact, we know from a deeper assessment that the house is in pretty bad condition. So now you have some decisions to make about what your next conversation is going to be with the homeowner. But at least you have this sheet with you that gives you a lot of good information and some reference points to use. So going back, I think we've kind of talked enough about this situation unless any of you have any questions. Now this is not a super common situation that things would have come this far out of control. So every time you look at a roof and you see a hole in it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be causing problems that go all the way down to the floor framing and the foundation of the home. But there are a few cues that you can take from the outside that let you know that this might be the situation. And one of those cues would be if you look up under the eave here, you can actually see that rot beginning to form here. That's where one of the trusses is sitting right now. And so that's giving you an idea that perhaps there's some structural rot problems. Now, normally this would actually be covered up with fascia or soffit. But what you can do, and so you wouldn't necessarily see it from the outside is what I'm saying, but if you're thinking of taking a project where there's actually a hole in the roof and you can see roof deck deterioration, it would pay for you to take off the soffit here and take a look at what might be going on underneath that, or the fascia, whichever it might be covering up where the truss would be sitting. Also, when you see a sill that's rotted out to this extent, if you can trace up the house to where that might be coming from and you can see that it's a problem that's been dripping from the outside of the house, then you know that you might not have interior problems. But if you can look up here above this window, you can't visibly see any problems with what might be dripping down on the outside and causing that rot. So it's an indication, not a smoking gun, but it's an indication that maybe some stuff is going on inside the wall, or at the very least behind the siding, that would be causing this kind of a problem. So those are a few things that you can see from the outside before you even get into the house that might tell you you might need to do a deeper assessment of this project before you get started. I believe that's all I had about our assessment. Just to put a plug in for the Sustainable Building Program, that is one of the things we do if you want a more in-depth assessment of a potential Brush with Kindness project. I am happy to come down and join you, but now as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, wow, after what I just described, they probably don't want me anywhere near their potential ABWK projects. But but it is a service that we offer, and it might be able to save you some headache and some heartache in the long run. So Pam, I'm going to throw it back to you now, unless there are any questions, and let you kind of walk the participants through where you're at right now with the project and what your options are and what you're thinking of doing.
Do you think maybe before that, if anybody does have, what are your thoughts about it, or what would you do? We've got EDs, we've got construction managers, we've got ABWK coordinators who are on with us today. Anybody want to be unmuted or type in some comments about your advice or what your approach might be? Just pause for a moment. Again, raise your hand and we can unmute you if you have a microphone or if you're on the phone. John says 26,000 versus a new house. So I think that's one of those questions.
Yeah, that's a good one. And Pam might want to address that a bit. The home itself, I believe the homeowner only owed 20 on the home. So you are getting into some kind of we're underwater with these repairs type of thing. Type of things. The other thing to think about, though, is that she is a low-income homeowner and probably is not, a new home isn't an option for her.
Right, and I think that's the tough spot for the affiliate, and I'm sure Pam will talk about this too, is just they want to help her. And it's, but they don't want to help her at the expense of being able to help other homeowners in the future. So it's just it's a really difficult scenario, difficult decision. I wonder what others would have to say, or sort of how do you say no, or how do you handle those difficult projects? Stacy asks, do other affiliates use the same financial guidelines for ABWK and critical home repair as they do for new home construction? And John is asking a little bit more about that, sort of, so could she afford a new mortgage?
I'm going to put both those questions to the affiliates, actually. Pam could probably answer John's question about whether or not the homeowner could get herself into a new house. And then as for Stacy's question, what do affiliates think about that? What do you use as your guidelines?
And I think if Rachel was on for her our family selection Vista or family services Vista, she would say that HFHI would recommend using the same financial guidelines for both. And I think she would say that most affiliates who've been doing ABWK for a long time are applying the same kinds of guidelines. I hope I'm speaking correctly about that, but I think I am.
No, you are. It is true. There are some affiliates that go lower, but when you think back to the recommendation that the partnership agreement is the same with ABWK and new homes, which means part of that is the ability to pay. So they are going to need to make a payment if you run it that way. So it would behoove the affiliate to ensure that the homeowner would be able to make a reasonable payment on the home.
And Pam, you can jump in at any time, but just to get back to a little bit too with John's question then too about, so could she afford a new mortgage? Part of the reality for this affiliate is that they're not ready to build in that community. I mean, that would be many years off. Yeah.
Right. We're in Southwest Minnesota, and in our bylaws it says that we are to rotate from county to county. And so the next county that we're planning to build in is in Pipestone County. We're going to be building in Edgerton. We of course are usually struggling to find funds or to do the fundraising to get the funds put together. So it has usually taken us 2 or more years to raise funds to be able to do the next build in the next area. So we're talking a couple of years probably before we're back in that area, which will be our next election after we're done with Pipestone County. So that does make it hard for us as an affiliate. The homeowner is making house payments now at this time on her home, so she still owns that. So how do you go to her and say, well, we really advise you, this house is very unsafe for you, you should probably move out, there should be a different living situation for you. But when she's still making payments on the house and that, how do you go and do that? And she owes $27,000 against it. The house tax value is not much higher. The tax value of the house is only at $47,000. So what's the appraised value? Probably, I don't know if it would even come to that, especially now at this point in the repair that it's in. So it really makes it hard. What really makes it hard for us is the board decided at the last meeting that we were going to rescind their motion that they had passed at the previous board that said we'd look at it as a critical repair or go with the ABWK. I'm not exactly sure where that leaves us, because I suppose that means we need to go back. We were going to go back and say, well, we're not going to do the project. We called the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership to talk to them about that, and they said they can't rescind on it. They can't go back. They have already written the loan with her, and also has she has paid points against it. It was a grant through FHLB also. So they gave her a $5,000 grant, and she's already paid points on it, and they've got the money in escrow for her. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave our partnership? It's our very first partnership. We didn't plan on it coming to this point where our hands are kind of tied. Will this always ruin the partnerships that we try to develop, or can we keep this partnership working together? And how do we do it? These are all questions that have been running around in my mind, and I've been posing to the board. We have our board meeting tomorrow evening, and we'll be discussing the project again. So if we actually sent a promissory note to a written thing with my signature on it to the other partnership entity, and told them that we would pay the remaining cost of that roof repair. So that's kind of where we're sitting. I could possibly look for some other options for more funding, but where does that leave us? It's really up there. It would be the easiest thing would be just to go to her and say, sorry, we can't help you. This is way over our head. This isn't going to work, and let them try to figure it out. But then where does that leave the Habitat for Humanity affiliate right now, and especially with the partnerships with the other entity? So I'm still kind of looking at options, trying to figure out what to do. So any advice from anybody would definitely be welcome as to how they would handle it, or how they would bring it to their board. Would be greatly appreciated.
So one of the questions that we did have was, did you do any part of this home improvement project? So I think you answered that no, not at this point. And John adds, and this is a construction manager perspective then too, is just that if you don't fix her home, eventually she might be forced out, and more than likely then turn into a renter.
Correct.
So if you made a loan and she's forced out, then you might actually lose that income stream anyway. So if the philosophy of how we do our work is that it is repaid and it is a hand up and not a handout. So I think that's where John is coming from. And And also a question about, is there a church in the area that would make a substantial donation to help her out? And I think she does have a pretty strong church community. And so, there's the option of just facilitating those other partnerships and acknowledging that you have played a role in getting the attention of others to try to help her. I'm not sure what the Southwestern Minnesota Housing Partnership, what their role would be in. So they've made the loan to the homeowner, and so then the homeowner then just would have to figure out how they're going to get that work done or how they'll use that money.
I'm not quite sure. It looks like they put it in escrow for her, and then they actually write out a check from that escrow to the contractor when he's completed the job.
Okay.
I have contacted the contractor, and I have asked him if he would supervise, if he would maybe think of giving us a cost or whatever, that he would just supervise us actually doing a lot of the repairs. I do know of a contractor company in that area that are very Christian minded. I've been thinking about going and approaching them and seeing if I could get their crew to help out, because a lot of the cost is going to be labor. I think with the 5,000 and then our bit that we can throw in there, we could pay for all the material that's needed in that. The contractor did say that he would use some of the material that she had there already had put together to repair the roof, to just repair the hole. So it's kind of like, where do I stop and where do I go? And like I said, the easiest thing would be, sorry, we can't help you, and be able to walk away. But it's kind of where I'm sitting right now. So,
I wonder what the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership has as far as an assessment process on their own end. I mean to say that they're into this project for $5,000 now, and they weren't at first aware of the extent of the problem, but they're the ones that must use a licensed contractor, and the licensed contractor is the one that runs the very real risk of needing to replace the whole roof. So I wonder if there's room for negotiation there, because it is FHLB money. So I'm wondering if Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, which I'm going to abbreviate to MHP from now on, could go to their contact at the FHLB and explain the situation, not because they may be able to offer more money, although that would be a great situation, but because FHLB might offer some flexibility in renegotiating the loan, or handing her the escrow from what she's already paid and nixing the project or something like that, something that would release the homeowner from the need to pay this loan for work that can't realistically be done.
I have thought about that also, as going and talking to the only conversation that has gone with the contact at Minnesota Housing Partnership was through DAR. And I have tried to call her, and of course we keep missing each other. I know that she's had some hours have been cut and things like that. But I was planning on visiting her tomorrow, calling to see if I could drive down to her office and talk to her about the situation, say, okay, this is where it is. How can we work together to resolve this? Or is there something that you can do with this type of thing? So that's kind of along the line that I was thinking also, was to talk to them and see what their options were.
Because if they could get that, the sticky part of this is that she's already locked into this loan. If she could get out from under that, the project would look differently from a financial perspective for her. If she could get out of that situation, she could figure out how to patch the roof to the point at which she could at least obtain homeowners insurance when she was fully aware of the situation. And I'm not recommending that because, again, it's an unsafe situation to begin with. But from her
perspective,
if it's back in her court and it's up to her and it's her decision to make, I mean, that seems to be, that's where I would want to get as an affiliate. I would want to get it back in her hands, out from underneath that $5,000 obligation to do something.
And I think what you need to, what you want to talk about with your board is what is your, I mean, you went into it. I had just responded to a comment from John about all around looks like a tough situation, but to think of this strategically and that the decision to pursue it was a strategic one about Pam's service area, as you saw on the map, is huge and there's 3 counties. And so to try to engage volunteers, donors, and people with what seemed initially to potentially be a simple ABWK, critical home repair project that maybe we could engage some volunteers. She qualified with their application process, and it was a nice way to help her. That her church was really engaged, and maybe it would be a way to get them involved to sort of lay the groundwork and get the ABWK program launched and start engaging some people in this community for a future build. And so clearly that didn't go the way that we had thought, but there are some great steps along the way about engaging with those partnerships and thinking about, so if this doesn't fit our model, who can help? Who else is out here? I think you'll be better able after this to articulate who's available in Southwest Minnesota to meet these kinds of needs. Because sadly, we're talking about this one specific home and this one specific homeowner and her situation. The reality is that in Southwest Minnesota and all over our state, there's lots of houses like this, where it might be that they think they just need to patch the roof, but there's a lot more going on, and that's what we'll discover. And to think about with your board, then what is our approach moving forward? We want our first ABWK project to be really solid, to be really positive, so that we can build the momentum to do lots more.
Correct. And just to patch the roof and then walk away, does that really leave a good picture of Habitat's Brush with Kindness programs and what it can offer? So we have to look at that. It's, like I said, it's a challenging one, and hopefully it's not going to scare the board. Our board tends, can tend to get frightened easily, and so I'm hoping that it's not going to scare them off into looking at other situations. I've learned that we're just not going to go in and just look at a hole in the roof. We're going to be looking at a lot more in the house prior to it. And I think that's what's so important, is having that committee ahead of time that can go in and do that. Those retired contractors or somebody, a paid contractor or somebody that can go in and look at these situations for us.
So in the last few minutes that we have here, does anyone else want to chime in on what their thoughts are on this kind of situation? Maybe if you have any new ideas for Pam, or you want to share something a similar situation that you've been in and how you handled it? A lot of shy guys out there. I'll probably get calls from you all individually later to share your story.
It is incredibly brave and a great service to all of our affiliates, Pam, for you to be willing to jump on here today and share that. Oftentimes we're sharing success stories, but I think this is just so real, and I don't think you're alone. And I think even if we haven't heard about it, there's many of our affiliates who may have already jumped into these situations when they first got started, and by sharing this, maybe we can help some others who start new programs to just make sure that they're taking advantage of the sustainable building program and having Molly help and being really thorough and not promising anything until you're sure you know what you're getting into. And I think you guys were really smart about that.
Yeah,
John jokes, remind me to stay away from holes in roofs.
What?
He says, remind me to stay away from holes in roofs. Yeah.
Don't get scared. Just just, apply some good assessment skills.
Well, I really
hand raised too. Oh, sorry, Pam. Go ahead, Pam.
After seeing those assessment sheets that you have, I thought, wow, those are great. What a great way to be able to go through and look at that stuff. And so definitely something that I would like to have a copy of so that they're able to look at this thing more wisely when we look at projects.
Good point. I will put those in an online folder, and you can all access them after the webinar.
Great.
Wade has his hand raised, and I do have a comment too that just says our affiliate is in the selection process for a critical home repair project for building a handicapped bathroom for a disabled man on the main floor of his house. This has given us a lot of good information to keep in mind when we do the home visit. Thank you for sharing. And Wade, I have you unmuted if you want to talk with us.
Oh, cool. Yeah, just I was wondering about the services provided, like specifically from Molly, because I'm taking applications for critical home repair now, and I would really hate to get into a situation such as this. So like, you're willing like almost any time to come and like do a walkthrough just to make sure that it wouldn't be too, I don't know,
Is
crazy.
correct. I think when you get close to the point at approving the project, and
Yeah.
you can use the assessment tools that I'll send out, but if you want to go through a couple with me first to just sort of get the feel of how to use it most effectively, I'd be
That would be awesome.
happy to do that. Absolutely.
Okay, very cool. How long do you think I should let you know in advance, I guess?
Well, this time of year, I'm pretty flexible, but usually if I could know about a week in advance, I would
yeah,
have
totally.
the ability to plan.
That's very doable. And it won't be, I mean, we won't be doing any projects until springtime, so I don't know if that'll be April or May or sometime around there, but yeah, that is good to know. You said you're sending out other information too, for the like the cost review form, I guess specifically is what I was wondering about, that extensive one. We
Yes.
can get that? Okay, cool.
Yep, there will be an email that goes out to all attendees that should have, if we can get it together, a link to this webinar, but the GoToWebinar service has been giving us problems with the recordings.
Sure.
Ideally, it'll have a link to the webinar, and it'll have the tools that we talked about, the assessment tool, and a few other things that will be useful as you go into the assessment process.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. All right, I think we're coming to the end of the time here. Nobody else has raised their hand or chimed in. So I think I'll wrap things up. And I want to thank you all again for coming. Thank you, April, for helping person the webinar. And Pam, thanks so much for sharing your story. I think it was a really good thing for affiliates to hear that they're not alone in these kinds of situations. I know we didn't come up with a lot of answers, but at least we know we're asking the right questions. So thanks to everybody for participating. Next time this webinar comes around will be 2 months from now. So look for it third Wednesday of every other month. So it'll be March, just before the Affiliate National Conference. And if you have a topic that you want to get into or something that you want to know more about or participate in presenting, by all means, let me know. Thanks again very much, and we'll see you next time. April, anything else?
Yeah, John just add thanks. Forewarned is forearmed.
Excellent.
And Pam, I would just say too, for your board meeting, if you want to, this is just me to Pam, if you want to chat or want me to call in or anything we can do to help with that too, just let us know.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I'm typing my, I forgot to put a slide in here for my contact information. So I'm typing that in right now. You can give me an email whenever you